everyone, and welcome to Talk Nerdy. Today is Monday, December 12th, 2022, and I'm the host of the show, Cara Santa Maria. And remember, as always, Talk Nerdy is and will always be 100% free to download. I really do rely on the support of both my advertisers and individuals just like you. Every single episode of Talk Nerdy is brought to you by listeners just like you. If you are interested in pledging your support, all you've got to do is visit patreon.com/talknerdy to learn more. This week's top patrons include Daniel Lang, David J.E. Smith, Mary Neva, Brian Holden, David Compton, Gabrielle F. Jaramillo Gonzalez, Joe Wilkinson, Leonard Prince, Pasquale Gelati, and Ulrika Hagman. Thank you all so, so much. All right. So this week, this was a really, really inspiring and motivating episode for me. I had the opportunity to sit down remotely, of course, with Danielle Boyer. Now, she is only 21 years old. She's an Indigenous, Ojibwe, and queer robotics inventor. She's also an advocate for youth and has been teaching kids throughout her, it's funny to say throughout her entire career. She's so young herself, but teaching has been a passion of hers since she's been very young. She founded something when she was only 18 years old called the STEAM Connection. It's a charity that's run by minority youth, and they actually offer technical education through robotics to children across the world with a really specific emphasis on revitalizing Indigenous languages that are unfortunately being actively killed off through colonial acts. Danielle is doing beautiful work. She's doing fundamentally important work, and she's doing hard work. And ultimately, this is work that I don't think we talk about enough within a public arena. And so, without any further ado, here she is, Danielle Boyer. Danielle, thank you so much for joining me today.
Bonjour, hello. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited. We almost connected a couple days ago. Both of us had internet issues, but we were able to roll with it. Now it's the beautiful weekend. I'm still here in Florida. Where are you dialing in from?
Right now, I'm back home in Michigan with my family. We had a ton of birthdays, and I'm back with them and the cats.
Love it, love it, love it. All right. So tell me, there's so many things that I want to dive into. Maybe before we get into your work, you can tell me about home, about family. Is Michigan where you grew up?
Yes, Michigan is where I grew up. So I'm Ojibwe from the Sault Ste. Marie tribe, which is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. But my family right now, we live about 20 minutes out of Detroit, Metro Detroit area, which is Troy. And my parents, both my parents live here, and my 3 cats. And I moved out recently, and I'm back home seeing my family and spending time with all the Scorpios who are in our family.
So wait, moved out recently. Is this your first time leaving home?
Oh my gosh, yes. It's been so scary. I'm 22 years old, right? And I moved a couple months ago to San Diego, and I've been living there, and I love it so, so much. It's way warmer than Michigan.
That's for sure. So I'm curious, have you or your family ever lived on tribal land, or and do you have a lot of friends who have lived on tribal land?
Yeah, my family is from the Upper Peninsula, the Sault Ste. Marie tribe. And although we don't currently live there, like our family does. And
Okay.
so, and my grandma lives kind of close to us with my little sister so that my sister can go to college near there. And we're kind of all over the place right now, but I get to see my family often. And honestly, that means so much to me to be able to do that and be able to have the choice to travel and see them and spend time with them. My mom is an artist, and my grandma has spent her whole life in like maternal healthcare advocacy and work, and I look up to them so much.
Wow. Yeah. That's like such incredibly noble work and so important. I think part of the reason that I was so excited to talk to you today on the show, I feel like I have touched on Indigenous kind of like sensitivities. I've touched on a lot of sort of science and the relationship between science in First Nations, land, how to like the sort of intersection between the quote Western world. But I don't know, looking back, if I've ever had an Indigenous perspective on the show from a
Oh, wow.
scientist.
Wow.
Because
That's
it's
interesting.
yeah, it's like it's a science heavy show, right? So mostly
Uh-huh.
we're talking about science, and of course it gets to the point where these books are passed my way from different publishers, and it's like, oh, new book by so and so about whatever. Okay, we'll book them on the show. New book, and then eventually I was like, there are too many white men on my show. I can't do this anymore. Like every book that comes across my desk is white men. So I started really seeking out alternative perspectives, and I shouldn't even say alternative. That's messed up. I started seeking out our perspectives, but I had an experience in graduate school. I'm working on my PhD now in clinical psych, where I took like a I don't remember what the course is called, but basically our multiculturalism, course, and it was taught by an Indigenous professor, which is very rare. Very often, multicultural courses, when you're lucky, are taught by people of color, right? Sometimes they're actually taught by white people, which is terrifying. But it's super rare in psychology or in the kind of hard sciences that you get Indigenous professors, and so I'm super excited to like get into it with you.
Yeah, hearing all of this is nothing new, but it definitely is discouraging because, as Indigenous peoples, we've always been scientists and technologists and engineers and inventors. Like, we've always been creating things. And we've always been leaders in scientific knowledge. And a lot of the science that you see, a lot of research is based in our knowledge, but it's lacking so much of our perspective and so much of the relationship that we have with the land. And it can be very discouraging to be in academic spaces. And currently, I'm not really in academic spaces. I actually dropped out of college, and now I'm running a charity and inventing robots and doing a lot of research projects. And that's really cool. But it is so hard to exist in those spaces and to see people kind of regurgitate knowledge that comes from your communities, but without the soul and without that knowledge behind it. And yeah, that can be really hard, and is honestly why one of the reasons why I left academia is because I was like, I'm not meant to be here. I knew that right away. Like Indigenous peoples, for example, take up only I think less than 0.4% of the
Oh,
engineering workforce. And that's not a surprise. I don't know any other Native person in robotics. Period.
it's
In robotics,
heartbreaking.
right? And yeah, entering the spaces, it can be so hard. And a lot of my friends are in academia, and I see what they have to go through. And oh my goodness, it's not fair to have these spaces like this. And that's why I started working in education, is because it's like, this is not fair. The kids, shouldn't have to go through a lot of these experiences ever.
Yeah, I think about, and I just want to reference it because my listeners would have heard it very recently. A couple of weeks ago on the show, I had an author, Karen Bacher, who is Canadian. She is like, she's a Rhodes Scholar. She got her PhD at Oxford, and she studies like really weird, interesting stuff like digital transformation and sustainability and environmental governance. And she wrote a book called The Sounds of Life, and it's all about learning about ecosystem health from listening, and like most of the conversation was about the relationship between kind of academic science and the sort of extractive historical nature of Indigenous knowledge, and the hope to go about it in a more humble, respectful, open way. But we are nowhere near there yet, not even
Mm.
close.
Nope,
Right?
not at all. And it's discouraging. Like, I teach kids in science and tech in general, and to specifically Indigenous students, right? And it's discouraging to say, like, hey, there's these jobs out here, there's these opportunities, there's academia, and then like not feel like those spaces are actually welcoming. And I used to recommend to my students, I was like, look at these careers, look at all these options, because it was exciting, it was so cool to see all these jobs, and it's so exciting to get paid a lot for your knowledge and to be smart and all these things. And then I changed my perspective at a point because I was like, the more I was in those spaces and as I was growing up, I was like, wow, they're soul sucking. I don't want to tell my students to be in these spaces. I I don't want to recommend that. And it's really discouraging because we also need our voices to be heard. And it's a hard balance to strike between advocating for ourselves and constantly having to advocate for yourself and just surviving as a student or as a person who just wants to learn stuff. You shouldn't have to always educate people and always have to stand up for yourself. But in many cases, that is what we have to do. But I changed my perspective at a point with my students. I was like, I'm not going to recommend these jobs or these careers anymore. We're going to focus on learning, and whatever happens of that happens.
Yeah, it's it makes me wonder too, and not to get like too philosophical and like, we're going to get a little wise now, but I'm curious about your perspective of like it's not fundamental to the nature of sort of academic science, right? It's really about bias. It's really about sort of this like white male heteronormativity, this power kind of maintenance. It's about not being flexible, being open, and really being humble to the perspectives of those who sort of came before us or who are offering up this knowledge. But I worry that sometimes I very often exist in like the scientific skeptic community, which is quite atheistic, and I'm atheist too, but it's quite atheistic, but it has a tendency to be very like logical positivist. And anytime anything spiritual comes up, there's this like, okay, you don't have to believe it, but why do you have to I don't know, like shit all over it as if it can't be compatible with science. I don't personally believe in God. I don't personally believe in anything metaphysical, but I don't see why there's this perspective very often that like individuals who have a more, I don't know, um, spiritual relationship with nature are somehow like less than in the sciences. It's gross.
I think what happens is because people approach it from a very compartmentalized approach. And I think that is inherently very Western, right? Like very, we're going to look at science this way and this is factual. We're going to look at spirituality this way and it may or may not be accurate. We're going to look at all these things in different ways and separate it all out. Same with how people view even careers. Like I do this. This is my job, but then this is me and my person, like outside of the job, right? Everyone separates things. And I think that's a very capitalistic way of looking at things. But in even how you talked about spirituality in of itself and is it compatible with science? That's compartmentalizing it when it's not meant to be compartmentalized. It's meant to all coexist and live together. And like I get asked a lot about by people about my job and stuff, and they're like, "Well, it's a job, right?" No, it's not a job. Like it's a responsibility I have to the youth of my community, and it's a responsibility I have to future generations. And it's with knowledge I have from past generations. And I don't think people see it that way. I don't think people even understand that. Like for us, it's not about adding spirituality to science. It's the relationship that we have with the land. It's the relationship that we have with each other, with our ancestors. So I think people do not get that.
No, they don't. And so often when I'm communicating with the co-hosts on the other podcast that I do, The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, and this is just a difference between like age and gender, right? I'm younger than them and I'm female and the rest of them are older and they're male, but we're all white. I'm Latina too. My mother's Puerto Rican, but I'm white. And they're like Italian. And so when we communicate, we have these conflicts of communication very often where I feel like all of their lenses are super kind of capitalistic and my lens is not so much, maybe because I do a lot of work in that area and I think a lot about sort of how capitalism is destroying us. And what I find very often is this like, well, that's not something that we can talk about in an evidence-based way, so it's not something we can talk about on air. Like that's an opinion or that's this like minimization of, like you were talking about, the soul of your identity. And it's heartbreaking to me that the scientific perspective in the West, the dominant scientific perspective in the West, has been like, oh, you can sort that out later. Right now, I'm just talking about this randomized control trial.
It's separated, yeah, and it takes so much meaning out of it. And like a lot of my friends are in academia, and they're actually fighting for our perspectives to be heard and for people to understand these connections. Like one of my friends is studying plants, the relationship we have with plants, and how they are our relatives and how we have relationships with them. And it's a communication we have, right? And there's a lot of Western, quote unquote, like scientific evidence to back our knowledge up. And it's hard for us to, I guess, convince other people of our knowledge because they separate these things out. They're like, there's no way, even though evidence backs it up. And one of my friends is fighting for our beliefs, and I'll say our generally because they're from a different tribe. We have different beliefs, but there is a lot of things that overlap. But the fight in academia for him is he gets berated. He gets treated so horribly. He gets told all the time that he shouldn't be doing the work that he does, that he should just go back to the reservation, that he's not welcome there. He's had his I don't know what they're called, like a PI or something, completely like physically smash everything off his desk. And like this is a shared experience for a lot of people. And so just even to be heard, to be heard on a level that like white men can respect, they don't realize how hard it is to even get those studies out there or to get those opinions out there. They're like, we're not going to hear you until it's documented. We're not going to hear you unless you have a source that we verify as having a PhD and all these things. And I'm like, well, to us, like our elders are the most, they know the most. Like we should be listening to them. They are a verifiable source. Same with these studies. They're hard to get out because there's so much getting in our way. People have no idea every single barrier that exists for us to be heard. And I don't feel like we should have to, but we do.
And it's such an uncomfortable position, even that I feel like I'm putting you in right now as we're talking on air, because I think about the fact that it's not your responsibility to educate us. It's our responsibility to seek this knowledge. And I want to serve as an ally. You know what I mean? I want to make sure that I can be that bridge, because I'm afraid that if I don't have that role, these, as we mentioned, like white male heteronormative ears will never even hear your whisperings. And so it's like, how do I bridge that gap? But I also don't want to put the onus on you to tell me how, It's like, it's such a difficult dance that we all find ourselves in, this uncomfortable, for many people, uncomfortable movement towards intersectionality, open-mindedness, listening, being humble, putting our own preconceived notions on the shelf. It's hard for people who have been doing something the same way their entire lives. And sadly, as I know from studying psychology, and as you know from having lived this, sometimes we just want to yell it louder and they still don't hear us.
It's hard for me emotionally, I think, because I don't always have the opinion of, people should maybe even regard our feelings. I think they should give deference to our feelings and to our opinions and to our experiences, because it's our land and we have knowledge that is valuable. And even if we didn't, oh my goodness, right? It's hard because there's a lot of ego involved. And people think they know more about us than we know about ourselves. And people tend to also put us in the past. So they view us as like past stereotypes, especially with like Hollywood media. They see us as a caricature of ourselves. They don't see us as real people. They dehumanize us. And so when we stand up for ourselves and we say, hey, like we actually know what we're talking about. We know what's best in these circumstances. Yeah, people don't want to hear that. And so I always advocate for like people not just wanting to learn more about us, but for listening to us, to respect us, and to give deference to us, because it is our land and we do know what we're doing. And to even down to, I think I focus a lot in my work on language and Indigenous languages, right? even thinking about how our languages were once spoken, and now by 2050, it's estimated that only 20 indigenous languages in the United States will be left. Oh my goodness, people don't know any of this. It's not even about people educating themselves. They have no idea where to start. So I think it is important for people to share, for people to listen, to platform, But it is so stressful for people to think, how can we include Native voices when, like, at the table, when I think that it should be our table.
Right. No, I hear you. I absolutely hear you. It's almost like when I think about the psychological stages of like racial identity development, to become anti-racist, very often people have to go through recognizing their own racism. And this is like beyond anti-racism. We're talking about anti-colonialism. It's like recognizing your own colonial bias and really trying to take yourself out of that, or at least be humble to it. And I don't think many people think about them, and many Americans, I should say, think about themselves as colonialists.
No, definitely not. And it's very difficult because there are so many different people here. People from who are, just moved here, people who've been here a long time, people who are indigenous, non-indigenous. There's a lot of different experiences here. And I am never the type of person to be like, everyone should get off our land. No, we should live together. But we also need respect. We also need to be treated like people. It's really hard. It's hard to everywhere I look, everything I see, it makes me think about what things could have been if colonization didn't happen. Even the language loss and things. Like, to lose a language is to lose your culture, because you can't communicate about things effectively, right? And
you can't even really think in those terms. Like, language affects how you think.
And in my language, Ojibwe Moan, words are very descriptive. Like, it physically says out, like, it describes the entire thing in a word, if that makes sense. And so when we're talking about plants and things, we're describing so much knowledge about that you just can't communicate in English. And it's a very scary thing to see how few resources exist in that, and how little people know about it. And it's very, very sad, especially in science, in academia. Like, people think we should be lucky if we even are there, And I don't think of it that way. I don't see it that way. When I think of the future I want for my students and for my community, I think about, I want them to be leaders. I want their opinions to be heard and respected,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so you're really actively working. I mean, I know that you're an inventor, and I want to talk about the robotics work that you do. But before we do, a big part of your kind of the intersectionality of your, I guess, career, your life, the life that you live, is teaching. It's passing on knowledge. So tell us a little bit about, how you work, who you work with, where you work, and kind of what it means to you to be able to have these relationships with your students.
I guess I should kind of bring it back like 11 years, which
Sure.
sounds crazy to say because I'm 22. Oh gosh, I'm 22. It was even more time than now. But I'm like, my math is off. Anyways, it was just my birthday, so the math ain't mathing. Anyways,
happy birthday!
Thank you, Scorpio season. But yeah, so I started teaching when I was 10 years old, which is, to say, is a very weird thing. And I always have to provide context because people have no idea what that means, right? My little sister was interested in like science and tech and resources like that, but those types of resources are generally very inaccessible. And a lot of that has to do with cost. A lot of that has to do with like lack of representation, lack of resources, etc. Right? So it's very hard to access. And in particular, my sister was interested in a robot that costs the robotics program. The robot costs $500, and it was just really hard because, you see a bunch of kids with resources, especially kids who are, white and well-resourced. They get to learn so many cool things, and they get to go so far, especially in their careers. They get into good colleges. They get a lot of resources, and they might not even know they have, just by being able to access things like after-school clubs and STEM programming. Because now in this day and age, like, STEM matters a lot for kids, right? It's everything from how they navigate softwares to how they work with others, and even within Indigenous knowledge, it's how you see the whole world around you, right? And so when kids are not able to access those opportunities, that's a rough thing. And so I was at Costco one day, and I was 10, right? And I saw animal puppets in like a pack on the shelf. And I remember I pulled my mom to the side and I was like, what if I taught an animal science class? I don't know what I was thinking. I was 10. And I was like, she was skeptical right at first, but very encouraging. And I was like, what if I drew like coloring sheets and, read books? And I ended up teaching a semester long kindergarten class for 25 kindergartners when I was 10. And I was homeschooled. So this was at a homeschool group. And so that was an interesting experience. I learned a lot, like, don't give kids sugar, like, when you're teaching and all those things. But for me, it opened my eyes to the world of education and the inequities within education. I'd already known, but it helped me see it more and understand more of the inner workings of that because, I was 10. And it also made me realize that there was more that I could do to solve problems that I saw than I thought. And within like specifically access to science and tech education for Native students, people have no idea the amount of gaps that are there, especially regarding things like a lot of our communities don't have internet access. And we don't have role models always to look up to, right? In STEM. And we do more now, which is amazing, but it hasn't been the case for a long time. And so, I started teaching. I grew a passion for robotics from my little sister. Seeing her interest in it, I was like, oh my gosh, I should try that. That seems really cool. I joined a robotics team in high school, and I got bullied really badly. I was the only girl. I did not fit in at all. And it was horrible. It was very clear when I'd walk into a room that people did not want me there. And I even got stalked with drones for years after, and internet stalked by the boys on the team. Because they just didn't want me there at all. I ended up quitting after a year, and I joined another team. And even to be there was a huge privilege, Like, I was so excited. I was my first time in public school. I was so excited. It was an opportunity I wouldn't have be able to have otherwise. So I was really enthusiastic. And to be met with that was so shocking and so disappointing.
So real quick, you were the only woman on that or girl on that robotics team. Were you also were there many Indigenous kids at your school?
None.
Okay. So yeah.
None.
So both.
Yeah. None at my high school. And yeah, so it was really difficult being in that experience. And then I quit. I joined another team, and the same thing happened again. And it was just so discouraging, to finally be excited and to be at a school that had a lot of opportunities for students, but I didn't feel like even then, even with those resources, I was able to access that, And even now, those experiences have definitely scarred me and how I approach, I guess, engineering and things in general. I am sometimes afraid to approach people, or I don't know what their intentions are. The stalking was bad. They would follow me around school. They would follow me around town to different things. And
you must have felt so unsafe.
Yeah, it was horrible. Every single time they would walk by me in the school hallway, I would pull out the recorder on my phone and just start recording because I didn't know what they'd say to me. And the school did nothing. They were like, you can call the police, but obviously, like, that's not a good option either. And yeah, it was really hard. And so I was like, oh my goodness, like, there's no one else who could have experienced that, right? Like, it's very random, drones. But I was speaking to a student recently, and the student is not at a tribal school, but it is, I believe, next to a reservation. So there's a lot of Native students. But she was telling me about how there's not many Native kids in the robotics program, and how the girls get stalked with drones too. And she's in middle school. And I was like, oh my gosh, this should not be a thing.
So this is just like, this is a way, I guess, a new way to bully, because these kids have access to this technology and they know how to program it. They know how to fly it. They know how to record with it.
Yeah. And people are not telling them not to do it.
Right.
And so hearing that, I was like, oh my goodness, I'd hoped we made more progress, but no. Like, I was just so discouraged to hear that. But she had such a good heart about it. She was like, it sucks, but she was like, I'm going to keep doing robotics. And I was like, you do it, like, I always encourage the students, though, if you're in an environment that's unsafe and you have any control over it, like, do your own thing if you can. That's not always an option, though, right?
That's so sad. It's so sad that, like, figuring out how to get out of that situation is not always an option. So kids have to learn how to mitigate the situation on their own. That's like,
right. I had to do peer mediation in high school. I had to do peer mediation, all these things. And for them to even put me face to face with those kids and have to explain why I didn't want to be called a whore, like, like, it's horrible. And so, especially, like, being queer, I would say, was the biggest target of those.
Okay, because there's that full intersectionality of being a woman. Do you identify as female?
Yes. Okay, there's complex identities surrounding that, and even the term, like, two-spirit in my community and all those things. But I identify as female, but it's kind of a complicated relationship.
Gotcha. So having that sort of, let's say, that feminine identity mixed with being Indigenous, mixed with being queer, this, like, very overt kind of intersectionality that you can't really, nor should you, but that's very visible, right? You can't, not you can't hide it. You don't want to hide it, but, like, people.
Well, I didn't even know too. I was homeschooled,
Right,
I didn't know.
Right. You were just being you.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It was rough. It was
terrible.
It was made obvious very soon when I got to school. People could, pick it out right away. And I didn't know, like, in high school, generally, like, I was like, maybe I should keep stuff to myself. I did not. Anyways, I didn't know, got bullied really badly. And yeah, that was hard. And to hear students go through the same thing, my goodness. But yeah, no, experiencing that, I was like, wow, that sucks. And even after I graduated, the same stuff was still happening. People were DMing me, like, harassing me. I even remember just a lot of it was sexual harassment as well. And I don't usually talk about that in interviews or anything like that, but a lot of it was sexual harassment. Like, people taking pictures of me, just so creepy. Like, just, I remember someone taking pictures of my butt as I sat in a like a desk at school. I was like, why would you do that? I'm like, that's not even a good angle, But
right. And that's the thing that I think we don't often talk about this stuff out loud, because it makes people cringe. They don't want to hear it. They go, okay, let's move past this really fast. It makes me uncomfortable. But it's there's so many things that I just want to, like, validate that you are saying out loud to me, to us, to my listeners, who, by the way, are predominantly male listeners who are hearing
that does not surprise me.
yeah, me neither, right? And so, but who are hearing this from a young woman who, a young intersectional, queer, Indigenous, feminine individual who is saying out loud, like, not only was this a violation, not only did this harm me psychologically, scar me psychologically, but this is something that A, is happening to more than just me, and B, was so intense that you had to leave certain spaces. And I also,
and I'm glad I was able to.
Yeah. And I want to commend you for saying that out loud, because I feel like a lot of times especially women, when we feel forced out of things, we sort of rewrite our narrative after the fact, like, oh, it was my choice and I was empowered and I chose not to continue there because of this other thing. But like literally saying it was so bad I had to leave, I had no other options. And
Yeah,
I'm
I think that's
lucky that
okay
I
to
was able to
say.
leave.
Right.
That's a big deal.
I think it's okay to say, because like if we have like toxic positivity when approaching certain things, or we're not fully authentic, especially for me, I'm going to give the context of speaking to my students. When my students go through hard things and then they hear people only say positive things, they're going to feel so alone, and they're going to feel so like alienated. And that's what ultimately made me talk authentically about myself and my experiences, was knowing that they could relate to me. Because I used to kind of like positivity wash a lot of stuff, because I thought I had to, especially being like a young person in activism, and I've been in the public space for a very long time now, and so I always thought I just had to say everything's great. No, it's okay. It's to be honest, but that's ultimately what made me start my charity, the STEAM Connection. And STEAM stands for science, tech, engineering, art, and math. And I believe is what STEM should be, which is integrating culture and beauty into aesthetic beauty, especially into STEM, and I created my organization when I was 18 years old, which is so weird to say now. Time has passed very quickly, and most of my adult life has been over COVID-19.
Right. I was going to say time is like doesn't even mean
Oh.
anything anymore. So
Oh,
since
no,
you
not
did
at
that,
all.
it's basically just been COVID the whole time.
Yeah, but it's given me a lot of opportunities to reach even more students than I expected, because I was able to change my teaching approach. But I'll give a little bit more context to the organization. What we do is we're a youth and minority-led charity that works to increase access to technical educational opportunities, specifically through robotics, as well as other programming that we put on. And we've reached over 600,000 youths now, which is wow. And every resource we provide is free of cost to the students.
And
And
who are the
overcome
kids? Like who? Sorry to
Indigenous
interact. Not
students.
not so much the kids who are running it, because I want to know about them too. But like, who are you reaching? Who are the kids that have access to these supplies and this knowledge?
So, Indigenous students, what we do is we partner with tribal schools, and we also partner with Indigenous nonprofits and corporations that put on youth programming for Native students. So, we act as a supplier in terms of we travel to schools and we teach, but we also supply robots that we invent, manufacture, and distribute for free.
Okay, wow, very cool. And the robots, so is this about teaching kids basic coding? Is it about teaching them builds? Is it about what the robots actually do? I'm so curious. There's so much
I
to
mean,
unpack
yeah,
there.
it is the basics of robotics, everything from mechanical engineering to computer science, but it is so much more than that in terms of we have language revitalization robots.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah, I was
robots that
reading about this. Oh my gosh, this is
I
so
love them.
exciting. Yeah.
They sense they're called scobots, and they sense motion and they speak indigenous languages. And they're wearable little droids. They remind me of a Mr. Potato Head. The
Mhm.
kids can. We put beaded earrings on them. We have one named Bougie Bernice that is a powwow princess. The kids deck them out, and they wear tutus and all those things and ribbon skirts. It's so cool, but it's a little wearable droid. It's on a GoPro strap and it sits on your shoulder, and we've made hundreds of them. And it's so cool. The kids get to program them and wire them and record language phrases with them. And the goal with that is to have a robust language resource that the kids can use to learn our languages, because it's so important, especially like my own language is considered endangered. And so to have this resource and have something that kids can resonate with, especially that can work without Wi-Fi, integrates artificial intelligence, and even works with augmented reality to learn language. That's so cool.
So it's basically scrubbing, is it scrubbing the internet for, like, how does it actually work for students to learn the language?
So we have two different types. We have a very basic one that is a little Arduino. It senses motion through a PIR sensor, and it plays like pre-recorded tracks. So it will run through a track every time it senses motion, and they're interactive sentences. So basically how to introduce yourself in a language, having the kids talk about their favorite hobbies and things, and learning those in different languages. And we even, actually, you mentioned being Puerto Rican, we have a Taino robot as well.
Oh, very cool. And so is this
and-
stuff that you have somebody pre-record, or is it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you've kind of coded all of this knowledge into it already. And in this specific robot, there are motion cues to then offer this script, basically.
Yeah, and so that's the very simple one, right? And we've been able to record a bunch of phrases with community members, elders. It's been so awesome, And so we have that, but then we also have our new one, which we are going to be rolling out soon and have been testing and designing with students, which is, artificial intelligence, where it's an internalized self-learning system that does not need internet access. So basically, the device in of itself is what it's learning from. And we're able to have more intelligent responses to students talking to the robot. It is nowhere near perfect yet, but we've been able to accomplish so much. And the robot costs $100 to make. So that is the coolest thing in the world to me, being able to see the students have robots that have, beaded hats and beaded earrings and regalia. And the goal is that all of our communities are so different. There are many Indigenous peoples. When I speak to my experience, I speak to mine and only mine. There are millions of us, right? And we all have different languages and tribes and foods and everything, right? And so when I created this robot, I wanted to make something that was intertribal, that the kids could relate to. And so they get to decorate it how they want to. They get to integrate their language into it. They get to make it theirs. And it's free.
How do you fund this? Like, how are you able to offer this to so many, kids?
So we have donations, grants. Corporations sometimes send us checks in the mail. Our largest funder to date is MIT Solve. And I'm one of the MIT Solve Indigenous Community Fellows. And they've been so incredibly supportive of the work that we're doing.
So if somebody listening right now was interested in donating, how would they go about making sure that they could get a donation to you? Because I'm assuming this is a full 501c3 nonprofit.
Yep.
It's something that they could do easily.
Yep, a tax deductible and everything. Our link to it is www.steamconnection.org/donate. And people can donate. It's tax deductible, and it helps us give away free robots because 93% of the schools we work with, they need to be subsidized. We need to cover everything. And as I said, it always goes free of cost to the students. And we have more than that, though. All of the robots that we manufacture are made out of recycled plastic, which is so cool.
Yeah.
And we have multiple robotics lines. So we have a simple little car named Every Kid Gets a Robot, or ECR. And that teaches kids how to wire things, how to do, problem solving. And we use it as a kind of teaching tool to get the kids interested in robotics and interested in basic STEM skills.
Mm-hmm.
It costs less than $20 to make, which is amazing.
So hence the Every Kid Gets a Robot.
Yeah. And it's so funny. The kids, they like to battle bot it out. That's their favorite. To fight the robots.
Of course they do.
I've had many interesting things happen working with kids. A kid cut open a battery with a screw.
Okay.
Once. I had a kid tattoo themselves. That was interesting. And not while I was there, I'll say that. And then one time we were in a courtyard with robots, running them around. I just finished a documentary, so they caught this whole thing on tape. But a robot runs under the fence, right? And a truck runs it over.
Oh no. How sad.
The kid was actually excited. She was like, "Oh my goodness, let's do it again." I was like, no. Absolutely not. But
and
yeah.
How old are these kids that you're mostly working with?
K through 12 with a focus on middle school.
Oh, love it. Okay, cool. Because that's like a very good age to really be able to get into it.
Oh, for sure. And we've sent out over 8,000 free robots now.
Wow.
I've been
Wow.
busy. I make these robots actually. Like
Right. So you're the CEO of this nonprofit, right? This was your
Yeah.
baby. You founded it. You're the CEO, but you work with a good team, right? It's not just you.
Yeah, everyone we work with are students, so they're very busy. I'm the only one who does this full time.
Gotcha.
And all of our contractors as of at this very second, so I won't speak to past or future ones, are all young people under 24, which is
Wow.
insane. Like we're working with augmented reality designers who are Chicano and are my age and are doing really cool things. But yeah, so I have a really great team of people who are so passionate about the work that we're doing. Everyone's a student though, and everyone is all over. And meaning we do most of the stuff remotely. So we have like a team of mentors who support our work and make sure everything is always we always need to be accountable to someone, right? And we have a team of students we answer to, and we have a lot. There's a lot that goes into the system, but I'm the only one who does it full time, and I'm the one who makes all the robot kits.
Right. Wow. Wow. That's a
It
lot.
keeps me busy, man.
Yeah, that's a lot. But it's incredible. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, like what you've been able to continue to accomplish. And I'm curious, this isn't all you do though, because you actually, like you said, you do like a lot of just hands-on teaching as well.
Yes. Yeah. I travel every week, every single week to teach kids. A lot of the programming on the West Coast opened up first. And so that's why I'm on the West Coast right now teaching, because that's where the schools asked me to be. And so that's where I'm at.
Very cool. And so you're going to basically schools on tribal land and you're talking to kids about STEAM and teaching them mostly like coding and robotics. Like what is your primary, or is it more just like this is why science matters?
A lot of it is life experience and kind of what I've been through in science and tech and showing them the robots. And my ultimate goal when working with the students is to give them basic tech skills that they can walk away with to be able to create solutions built by our communities for our communities, right? At the end of the day, the jobs, all those things, they matter, but I want the kids to be able to create self-sustaining skills. And so I want to show them the potential of robots and the potential of creating interesting, weird things. And so a lot of the class is focused around like mental health and like just personal experience as well as tech and science, and depends on how long the programs are. Some of them have run like seriously like a year, and other ones are one-time workshops, and we're very flexible. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but what I always think is the most important to talk about above all else is like mental health.
That's amazing to hear you say that. And I'm curious, sort of, what has been your experience opening up with these kids and basically creating a safe space for them to open up? Is your experience with kind of mental health similar to what you're seeing in a lot of these young kids?
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I have CPTSD, I have depression, anxiety, stuff like that. And so it's a little rough sometimes. I also have a learning disability. And so like for me, I hear the kids have the same experiences I do, and oh my goodness. Like I always you know it, right? Like suicide rates are so high in indigenous communities,
Yeah.
especially for youth, and like um you need to talk about it. It is a very vital conversation to have, and to be able to have the students talk about themselves. And there's a lot of experiences that we all share that I would never talk about on air,
You're right.
just because I feel like it would feed into stereotypes that would, I don't think non-natives need to hear.
Sure.
So I will not go into depth too much on the shared experiences in the negative sense, because I think it's important, and there's places where people can hear that, but I don't think that this is the space.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, we do share, unfortunately, a lot in that way in common, and there's been a lot of trauma and a lot of very, very hard things. And when there's collective trauma, there's a lot of unfortunate results from that in terms of mental health and things to cope with mental health. And so, um, yeah,
And are you
working with
seeing like many practitioners who, I'm just so curious about this now. Now I'm becoming kind of like selfishly curious because this has become my field. I was a STEM person. I mean, I'm still a STEM person, a science communicator for years, worked as a neuroscientist, and then came back around. Really, I think for some similar, I mean, there's crossover at least, some similar reasons. Like we're missing the heart, we're missing the soul. Like we need to get back to empathy, we need to get back to humanity. And I wanted to train as a psychotherapist. I'm an existential psychotherapist. I mostly work in end of life, life limiting illness, but like really it's the deep stuff that I get to with my clients. And I, I'm so worried that there aren't enough therapists out there who have I don't want to say the competency, because none of us can be culturally competent ever, but the cultural humility, the cultural openness to work with Indigenous clients, to make individuals feel safe, feel like there's a crossover between this very Western idea of psychology, which is no different than Western physics and Western everything else, and an Indigenous perspective. And I bring up, like, I shared this thing on my Instagram the other day, and it's pithy and it's whatever, but it's like, it's funny because it's true. Like a Black woman, I think she was a Black psychologist, and she was saying some funny thing about, like, when I think about mental health today, I think about how all of psychology and the DSM and everything is really based on how much you think and act like a white man. So really, when I
yeah.
reflect on my diagnoses, I see them as compliments, and
Yeah,
it's like, it's
a
funny, but
lot of
it's
my friends
sad.
agree with that.
Yeah.
They're like, "This is
Yeah.
my diagnosis, but this person doesn't understand intergenerational trauma, so I'm gonna disregard it." I'm like, "You know what?
Right.
If you wanna disregard it, you disregard it."
Right. Like how on earth are you to navigate working within a system where the very people who are the helping professionals are also exacerbating the problem?
Oh, for sure. Oh my goodness. Yeah. There's not enough native therapists. I'm under the firm belief, and some people disagree with me, so I will put that out there, but that like non-native therapists should not be therapists for native students. And some people disagree. I'll just put that out there. But yeah, we need more therapists, just as there's a lot of careers we need more natives in, specifically tribal law and mental health careers, as well as teachers, just honestly everything. But we need more teachers in general. But yeah, it's very scary to see the state of mental health resources, and a lot of it is even down to how we navigate our own lives with our families and all those things, and different you know I won't go into depth, I guess, on that, but
But you may be
yeah.
inspiring. You are traveling the country. You are talking to these kids, ostensibly about robotics. And yes, you are talking to them about robotics and about all of the incredible connections and the growth that can come through engaging in this aspect of STEAM. But you're also opening that little portal for them to see, maybe there's a place for me where my unique experience and my unique talents can develop and help other people. Like, I would not be surprised, Danielle, if there are kids today who become Indigenous therapists, who become Indigenous teachers simply because they've interacted with you.
I sincerely hope so, and I know that that role is not purely based on me. There's so many people in our communities who do so much for our youth, right? I ultimately hope that the students we're building things for community by community. And so I don't see it as an individual role or an individual teacher, as we all have things that we need to do together to uplift one another. And it makes me excited for the future. Many things. There's many things that make me sad, but I see the students, and I see just how, they're little geniuses, like seeing the kids like build AI systems and just create robots. And I'm like, wow, you're 13? No way. Seeing that makes me excited because as technology continues to develop, we do too. And we create cool things. We have cool ideas that I want people to be able to see and for us to be able to benefit our communities and solve the problems that we have because I think that we are the best equipped to solve our problems. And yeah, it just I get excited.
Mm, I love that. On that note, I'm curious, before we dive into sort of the final segment of the show where I ask my guests the same two questions, I ask everybody the same exact two questions and really delight in all the different answers that I get. But I'm curious before we do that, is there anything we didn't get to? I mean, there's so much to talk about with you, but is there anything where you're like, oh, if we got to talk about this before we say goodbye?
Honestly, I'm not quite sure. I personally have seen a lot of the content that you share for a long time and have looked up to your work. Um, I it's hard to be in these spaces and not to have a lot of role models or people to look up to. And yeah, I think the first time I ever went to LA was actually for your SciComm camp
Ugh,
when I was
yay.
19.
You were
I
19.
was
Oh my
19,
gosh.
yeah, and I remember that was, like, the first time I did that. I had just turned, like, 19 as of, like, that week or something, and, yeah, it was such a crazy experience. I was able to meet a lot of people who I still talk to today and still have really good relationships with, and it was just, like it was so cool. It made me really open my eyes to, there are more careers than I thought, and that I didn't have to. I saw, I guess, also unconventional approaches to science and how I was like, oh, I don't. I was there, and I was there with the scholarship for the camp, and I was like, studying and all those things, and I'm like, I don't know how well I fit into this, and I met other people who weren't doing those things. They were just doing their own thing and studying what they wanted to study. And I was like, oh my goodness, I could do that too. And so I definitely credit a lot to my unconventional path to seeing others who have done that and who have created things for themselves. And yeah, I just want to share that because it was it's so interesting to look back and know that that was not that long ago. That was before not that long before COVID, and that it feels like so long ago, but it really wasn't because I'm only 22. But yeah, so it's interesting to me to see that, and now living kind of out in that direction in San Diego, I'm just incredibly thankful. And I actually have a photo of you meeting the robot, one of them for the first time.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't even remember it until I was looking through my photos. Like I got a Google photo reminder from like this time last year, like the other
No
day. And I
way.
was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I have this picture. But I
Oh, you
just thought
have to
that was
share
crazy.
that with me.
I
Oh my
will. I will.
gosh. Oh, Danielle, I have to say, like, this is one of those moments where I'm so glad that we are podcasting only and not doing video because, like, I'm kind of crying. That was
Yeah,
just
I'm like,
so
oh, don't let me see
meaningful.
me ugly cry, I genuinely appreciate, the platform that you have and what you've done to share because it is hard, I believe, in these spaces to be you were talking about like, oh, not the normal, and then you kind of corrected yourself. And honestly,
Yeah.
it is the average. It is what people are used to seeing. And when you're anything outside of that, like people do not treat you well. And I can't imagine the reactions people have had online to even just speaking your mind and standing up for what you believe in. But it's needed and it does make a difference.
Mm. And I mean, same back at you. The love fest continues for 1 second. Deal with it, everybody listening. I am in awe of the insights and the wisdom that you have developed at the age that you are. When I think back to where I was when I was 22 years old, the way that I thought about the world, just how naive I was, how narrow my worldview was. I mean, I think I was always progressive. I think I was always trying to be open to other
Mhm.
perspectives. But I mean, obviously, this is a lifelong journey, and I'm
Yes.
still more narrow than I want to be. But look, thinking back, I made so many mistakes, and I hear things that you say that are like I'm learning from you still. I'm almost 40. You are so insightful and so wise for your years, and it's really inspirational. And I really do believe that people who take the time to listen to this show and actually engage with it are going to walk away with a shifted perspective. And that is so important. And that's because of your voice. So I want to thank you. And your voice being a conduit for the voice of, as you mentioned, your ancestors, your culture, your family, your people. And I
I
want to thank you for sharing
appreciate that.
that.
Thank you. I To me, my one of my main goals, especially when talking to people who do not have similar experiences to mine in terms of just, not being native or whatever, I want to shift perceptions, as you said, but specifically on stereotypes and how people view us. They don't always think that we know what we're talking about or that we have expertise or experiences, and that we don't always look at expertise in the same way that they do. Like, it doesn't matter how old you are, and it doesn't matter. Like, we're learning and we're always learning, and we have knowledge that we can share, and we can continue learning from each other, and I think that's a very beautiful thing. And yeah, I want to encourage everyone to just listen more and to follow Indigenous peoples online, and to look up local resources for the tribes around them.
Absolutely. And so, as we kind of enter into this last segment, I'm curious about your answers to these. I'm especially curious about your answers to these questions because they're sort of big picture questions, and your perspective is so different from so many people listening and so many people I've had on the show before. So, I want you to think about the future in whatever context is relevant to you. It could be personal or communal, it could be cultural, it could be global, it could be cosmic. And I want you to tell us first, what is the thing that keeps you up the most at night, that you're the most concerned about? You have legitimate worry, pessimism, maybe even cynicism around. And then on the flip side of that, where are you hopeful? Where are you finding promise? What are you looking forward to and are like genuinely, authentically optimistic about?
I think one of the things that definitely keep me up at night and like stresses me out a lot is just I don't know, the state of child safety, and how many dangerous things are out there for kids, whether it be on, media or what they're experiencing with people around them. There's not there's a lot of things that endanger kids, and that keeps me up at night for sure. Because I even think about like the different things I was exposed to at a young age, and I'm like, I don't want that for any kid, and yeah, seeing that, like, definitely brings me a lot of anxiety and stress, and as well as other things do, like language loss, and there's a lot of other things that definitely stress me out. But I would say like a child's safety is like the most important thing above education, above anything else, right? And so it definitely like is something that keeps you up, makes you feel sick, especially like working with kids and seeing, you know I you can see when someone's been through a lot, and when you have experiences that they resonate to, even if it's a child. No one wants to see that. No one wants to be reminded of that. So for me, that's what keeps me up at night, is seeing that and knowing bad things happen, and that you can't keep every child safe, and that's hard. And that goes for every child I've worked with, native and non-native. Like, watch your kids. That's important. Um, so that was the first immediate thing I thought of when you asked that question, and I think it's probably a very unconventional answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's the thing that immediately, like, we need to keep students safe, and especially given recent media things regarding like a large fashion brand on child safety. Uh, it matters to keep kids safe, and to protect them from the evils of the world. And so that's the first thing that I thought of. In terms of optimism, I think about all of the role models that Native students are going to have now growing up, especially with TV shows like Reservation Dogs and movies like Prey with accurate Native representation. I That didn't exist, you know? And so now this is something that's new as of, the past couple years. That's going to transform self-expression and self-identity and how the kids view themselves and even how I view myself. And that makes me really, really excited and optimistic for the future because maybe people will start listening.
Oh, gosh. Danielle, it's been such a joy, such a pleasure. I've learned so much. My heart is warm from having sat with you during this time, and I'm so excited to get back to California because you're not that far away, and
I'm in
hopefully,
LA all the time,
yay,
working.
yay.
I work with the LA Tribal School there, and that school does so much beautiful work for the students. They are a prime example of doing it right and doing it beautifully. Oh my gosh! But we're going to be working on some cool robotic stuff in the coming year, and one of their students is going to be leading an artificial intelligence special group for Native students with me, and I'm so excited. I love SoCal. The kids are amazing. I'm thankful to be a guest there. Michigan will always be my home, but I am thankful to be there for as long as I'm there.
Oh, this brings me so much joy, and I can't wait to be able to finally be in touch and spend more time with you. So for everybody, visit steamconnection.org. That's how you can learn more, and you can give back. You can also learn more about Danielle at danielleboyer.org. Danielle, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. In my language, thank you is the word miigwech. So miigwech.
And everyone listening, how do I say that?
Miigwech.
With an N?
M.
Miigwech. Okay. And everyone listening,
Got it.
miigwech for being here week after week. I'm really looking forward to the next time we all get together to talk nerdy.